Poppy Playtime has just released a brand new trailer for their upcoming third chapter, confirming tons of things about the story. And we even get a good idea on when the chapter will actually release, along with some new theories popping up that give us some ideas as to what the next chapter will of course contain. So I'm assuming you guys already know that a few days ago, Mob Games uploaded a YouTube video as well as put it on Twitter showing a teaser trailer for the nameless third chapter. Inside of the trailer, we hear Elliot Ludwig announcing the grand opening of a brand new area inside of the building called the Playcare. And he also makes plenty of references to the adoption program we have seen in posters around the game before. During all this, in terms of visuals, we see some pretty basic stuff of Huggy Wuggy and a couple other characters. However, before the trailer ends, we also see this cinematic shot of a never-before-seen gas mask, and that's where the trailer ends. Not to mention, we also get a release window of next year, confirming to us that Chapter 3 will come out sometime in 2023, which is pretty expected. Anyway, this trailer was more or less, while seemingly vague, able to confirm a lot of people's suspicions about what the third chapter will be about, because we have already heard about this Playcare now on multiple different occasions, even physically going to it at the end of the second chapter before it abruptly ends when the train crashes. So I think it's basically confirmed that the location for Chapter 3 is the Playcare, but inside of it, it actually goes a lot deeper because this specifically teased location hints throughout the second chapter and this Chapter 3 teaser that it is very much at fault for causing all the monsters who chase us around the factory. Because if you didn't know, in the second chapter, we find out that the experiments that led to these living versions of toys were done by combining people and these dolls. In fact, we even see in a couple occasions little logs showing us the toys and people being matched together for these experiments. And the reason why this is important is because throughout the entire game, we are literally trying to explore the factory to figure out why it was abandoned and where things went wrong. So finding out where these experiments were taking place is super important for solving those problems, and I think the third chapter is where we actually find it. It seems pretty clear that the Playcare, based on the name sounding like daycare and from its relation to the orphanage program, is supposed to be a place that on the outside seems like a safe and fun place to keep all of these little children inside of the orphanage program, but in all reality, behind the scenes, it seems like this is actually where they're getting all these people to experiment on. Because as I mentioned in other theories, getting tons of different people to agree to have their bodies experiment on must be really hard. So instead, it seems like they're riling up all these orphans inside of the factory who don't have parents who can tell them no, and then they have a constant supply of kids inside of this daycare to experiment on. And what confirms this the most has to be this gas mask that we see at the end of the trailer. Because while it seems almost meaningless at first, with the context of this play area being a place for children to be experimented against, the mask is clearly symbolism for science or experimentation, confirming that this Playcare place that we're going to enter in the third chapter is going to reveal huge amounts about what actually happened to these children that eventually ended up becoming these twisted monsters. It seems pretty fitting that we would finally start to get more story-driven information in this third chapter, because when you think about it, Chapter 3 is actually officially the middle point of this game. And so now it would definitely be time for us to start figuring out something huge about the story, and it's already getting really interesting with nothing more than a 60-second teaser trailer, so I'm already really excited. But while the story and the trailer already seem to be incredibly exciting, let's talk about Chapter 3 in terms of release dates and actual gameplay. For one, I still think we're waiting to figure out who the unsuspected main antagonist of this chapter is going to be, and I believe this because looking at the trailer, we see inanimate toys of Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs, which symbolizes to me that we have already defeated them, and I don't think they'll be coming back to life or anything for that reason. But what's interesting is that while we see these other two, we also see a Brawnhead, which is confusing to say the least since he doesn't really have much part in the game at all yet. But this could possibly be hinting that this third mysterious enemy could actually be him. I'm just not exactly sure yet. And actually, some more evidence I just discovered: when looking at the mask itself, it shares the exact same color scheme as Brawn. So that definitely gives the theory a lot of validity. Clearly, this chapter is going to be a whole lot darker than any other chapter because let's be real. While Chapter 1 and 2 were a bit creepy, being chased by two characters named Huggy Wuggy and Mommy Longlegs is honestly kind of comical, but it seems like things are about to get serious for once. Looking back at the trailer, when Elliot Ludwig is making his big long speech about the opening of Playcare, he makes a really weird and ironic statement saying that the toys were nothing without them, talking about the children, of course. And also, near the end of the trailer, we start to hear people cheer, kids even laughing and having fun. But that doesn't last, as eventually we begin to hear faint cries that fill the entire ending of the trailer before it of course abruptly ends. Something that's also interesting is that if we brighten up the trailer, we could see that behind the mask there are tons of different toys that we have already seen before, all of which also seem to be lifeless. And it seems like there is some sort of correlation to another popular game, Five Nights at Freddy's here, where we could assume that all these different inanimate characters get their life from all these other children that are being experimented on. And it's honestly super dark to think about about the fact that these children are being experimented on, and they don't have any parents or anything to protect them from these experiments, as mentioned, because it's highlighted multiple times, of course, in the chapter that they are orphans with no parents. And what's even worse is that since we hear the children screaming in the end, that tells us that they weren't aware of what was actually going on behind the scenes. Playtime Co. is using these children clearly because they could experiment on them without getting caught, but as we hear the children cry, it becomes clear to us that maybe even they become aware as to what is being done to them as time passes. I mean, having all these children slowly disappear inside of the orphanage and get experimented on must eventually get pretty worrisome. And when considering that, as we know, the experiments eventually failed, causing everybody, including the workers, to go missing, maybe all the screaming in the end is actually the children being attacked by the failed experiment Huggy Wuggy or any other character that we haven't heard about yet. I mean, characters like the prototype have already been highlighted for murdering and attacking things and getting aggressive, so this isn't something new. But while we could theorize all day about how we think everybody got killed with all the information we have, regardless, we still don't know too much about what event actually caused everybody to suddenly go missing, and this trailer may have actually been giving us a first little peek into what that event actually was. We get a lot of information for release dates as well, because mob games seem to be sticking with their style that they've done for multiple chapters at this point, where they release a teaser trailer, followed by a full trailer, a VHS teaser, and then of course the chapter's actual release, which we're already seeing once again with, of course, the Chapter 3 teaser. And the reason why this matters is because it means that we're officially in the rollout stages for Chapter 3 after a few months, finally. There was, of course, the big delay from when Chapter 2 came out to this teaser, but this big gap was mostly because they were focusing on finishing the mobile port of Poppy Playtime Chapter 2, which just got announced literally a couple days before this teaser was released. Meaning that it's officially go mode for mob games to focus on this Chapter 3 full time, and they have no other distractions in their way. However, something I think is worth taking into account before this chapter actually releases is that even though the mobile version appears to finally be done, the second chapter getting put on mobile has taken almost just as long as it took to make the second chapter entirely. And that has clearly taken a lot of time away from the developers that otherwise would have been put into progressing the third chapter. And we can only assume that as the chapters go on, they're just going to get bigger and bigger, not only making the full version take longer, but also meaning that trying to compress these on a mobile is going to become more difficult, causing even more delays. And while a bunch of people seemed honestly surprised we weren't getting Chapter 3 all the way until next year, I was already ready for a release time like that, and it seems like the release times are going to get even longer as time progresses. Anyway, luckily we did still get this teaser, and it gives us a bunch of answers as to what Chapter 3 will contain, but we also still have a ton of questions that are yet to be answered as well. For example, what is the deal with the prototype? And if this really is the chapter where we confront the source of all these monsters, will there be any more new characters? Well, as hard as it is to believe, when this chapter releases, we will be over halfway done with Poppy Playtime, assuming of course they do a 5-chapter system, which seems to be the most likely, or at least somewhere around that estimate. So that should mean we should expect a very established story leading us into what could eventually be the conclusion in the next couple years. I don't know, we will see. Comment egg to confuse anyone who didn't finish the video yet. Subscribe and peace.